Anything out of what we've already covered that you want to go and revisit? Otherwise, I'm going to move on. Right, let's move on. So we looked at this exam question before we broke, and we noticed that to answer this, you didn't need to read all this stuff up here. So here's some thoughts on exam questions. When we get an exam question, we're going to need to be able to pick the best answer. And best answers need some interpretation. So when we have a question that asks, proposes a scenario, and then gives us two answers, both of which are correct, or four answers, all of which are correct, how do we select between them? So imagine the question says something like, changes are authorised by, answer A, the project manager, answer B, the steering committee. They're both correct. So what we want is, they're both potentially correct. So what we want is, if there's an answer that's true in all cases, that's going to be a better answer. So if answer C was to say a change control board, or as identified in the procedures in the project management plan, that would be a better answer, because not because the other two were wrong, but because this one holds true in more cases. So best answers are more generally true, or true across more scenarios, more circumstances. The best answer suggests that the project manager directs and leads the project, taking account of the needs and wants of stakeholders. So we always listen to stakeholders, but we push the project forwards to always be making progress. We are the manager and the leader, and if you haven't done your application yet, the thing you need to say, you only get about 500 characters, so this is like writing tweets. You need to say, when I led, when I managed, I don't we, I. It's always making it clear that you were the person causing things to happen. If the question says something like, you've just taken over a project, it appears that the previous project manager was a lying, what should you do first? Well, we always investigate before taking action. We act in the context of a plan. So the first thing that we do when we have a situation where things are not clear is we investigate, rather than we assume. Nothing wrong with assumptions. It's not, don't make assumptions. It's always act on the basis of having clarified those assumptions, or confirmed them, or challenged them. Equally, when we're trying to decide or take action, we use estimates and lessons learned and historical data. So experts estimate and do everything else, and they do it from the basis of previous histories and recorded organisational process assets. Change is to be expected. So when we get an exam question that talks about change, the first thing that we should say is, we expect change. So change is not bad, change is a fact of life. But we do not allow change into the baselines without going through integrated change control. So change is a fact of life, and we have a process to handle it. And we know that change requests get created in, I think it's 24 places, but if that number was wrong, I wouldn't be surprised, but I think it's correct. And they all go to one place, which is integrated change control. And then that sends approved change requests to a few places, 3 or 4. So you can do whatever you like as long as it's within the approved scope baseline, but you never do anything that's outside this approved scope baseline, because you get through change control, so the baseline is always current. We always communicate, and then that lot is mostly what we need for best answers, but you do need to be aware of things like the magic words like any, may, best, first, not. So I'm going to pick some questions out for you to do over the next few days, and as you do, when you find a word like any or may, that generally broadens the acceptability of a question or an answer, in the same way that things like entirely or exactly or completely narrow it. So you might get and then the answers say entirely, That's probably not likely because they've just narrowed it down. Or they might say may include, in which case that's just... So these words, when you come across them, are always things that you should hear a little bell go off in your head. So there's something in here that I need to not just have knowledge of the book, but I need to interpret it as either a tight or a loose fashion. And when you start coming across these, you'll start to become sensitive. It's the difference between, that's a green piece of the jigsaw puzzle, and that's a piece of the little girl's dress. There. You already know, skip to the end of long questions, although that's perhaps less prevalent than it used to be. It's still there, though. You also know questions will be of the form what to do next or how to avoid, and that's about understanding from page 25 the sequences within each of the boxes, generally. A few other thoughts around some of this stuff. So the questions are going to include irrelevant information. That's there to disorient you, distract you and upset you. So learn to get rid of that this week. You will have sequences of difficult questions. They will be balanced out by sequences of easy questions. I'll show you an email from somebody in a moment who said, my first 20 questions was so hard I was thinking I should get up and leave. They didn't, and they passed. The questions actually do something mostly that we can't do yet, which is integrate facts from across the book. But I did show you one first thing this morning. If the CPI is this, I'm in this column. If I'm in this column, then I know it's a controlling something. And you want to know about procurement, it's controlling procurement. The questions you see on the exam will be identical to hundreds of questions out there in the real world. So while every question is going to be new to you, there's a limit to how many questions they can actually construct. So the more practice you do, the more you're going to look at a question and go, well, last time I read this question, it was Fred, not Mary, and last time we were in the dairy industry, not the nuclear industry, but everything else is going to be the same. So questions will all be new to you, but they require PMI's view of the correct view. There are plenty of places in this book where if we weren't doing this course this week, I'd just be saying, you know what, this is wrong. They will use alternate terminology. So even if it's not in the glossary, not in the abbreviations, they may still use alternates because they're testing whether you understand. So they're not going to give you the words back out of the book. We've already seen many questions use long scenarios, and we know that you skip to the end of those. They have poor grammar. The theory is that sometimes the grammar is deliberately poor. They may use terminology you've never heard before, and that may still be the appropriate correct answer. And there's a 4-hour clock, and it doesn't stop once you start the exam. And it used to be the case that before the clock started, you could dump that memory sheet of formulas and the like, and they changed that November before last.
What did you say now?
Okay. There's a 4-hour clock. When you start your exam, the clock starts ticking down.
Yeah.
When you get to the exam centre, you get sat at your little booth with the computer. You have 15 minutes to familiarise yourself with the exam software. It used to be the case that you could write this memory sheet out during that 15 minutes. You now cannot officially do that till you start the 4-hour clock, and then you can. Every time we stop for drill practice, my recommendation to you is that you draw out page 25. The first time you do it by looking at the book, because you can't remember it. Although, you're already, what's in column 1? Without looking at the sheet, what's in the first column? Charter and stakeholders. What's in the last column? Closed project or phase. So there you go. You've already done 2 out of 5 columns. That's 40% of that sheet you can already do from memory. What does every box in the second column start with? Something point 1, write a plan of some sort. So you can already do 50% of that sheet. So what I suggest is each time we stop for drill practice, you write that sheet out and do as much from memory as you can, and then go to the book and write it out from the book. Because by the time we get to Wednesday, if you do that, Thursday maybe, you won't need to look in the book. Then you carry on doing it, because when you go to the exam, your adrenaline level's likely to be high. So you sit down, you familiarise yourself with the software, we'll talk a bit more about that, and then you start the clock and then you dump the sheet. Even if you never look at it again, you're now doing something you've done 10 times before. So the adrenaline level reduces. Okay, so you want to be able to write out those 2 pages, and some people say, I never looked at it again, and other people say, it was actually really useful to me all the way through the exam, because when they give you a maths question, they don't give you the numbers to calculate. They give you the answer on one of the parts of the question and then ask you what the other part of the question would have been to get that answer, for example. So if you've written the formulas out, it's very easy to go, so they give me that one and they give me that one. So that's the one I haven't got. And that one would be that divided by that. No, I have to do it the other way up. It makes it much easier if you've written it out. It makes it much easier for some people if you've written it out.